You crashed my system. You're fired.
The CTO's voice echoed across the ninth floor.
Get out before I call someone to catch a rat like you.
40 engineers froze at their desks. Aaliyah Sterling stood at her desk. 3 screens still glowed red behind her. The wall clock read 7 a.m.
My name is Aaliyah. An attack is underway. 90 seconds.
She slowly turned from the screens. Her jaw stiffened.
Did I ask?
Trevor Anderson slammed his hand on her desk.
You messed up the system. Sat here stroking your rat whiskers, and now you talk back?
You'll regret firing me.
He sneered. At noon, 3 FBI cars would block the property, and an agent would tell him who really saved his $200 million deal. To understand the woman he fired, you first need to know who Aaliyah Sterling was. 3 years before that morning, Aaliyah Sterling stood at her husband's funeral in a small church in Norfolk, Virginia. Lieutenant James Sterling, United States Navy cyber warfare, killed during a classified operation overseas. She held their 5-year-old daughter Maya against her hip and did not cry. She had promised James she would not cry in front of the child. After the folded flag was placed in her hands, an old Navy chief leaned close and whispered something James had once said to him during a long night of incident response training. "Patience is a weapon, ma'am. Your husband told me that more than once." Aaliyah had nodded. She already knew. James had said the same thing to her, in their kitchen, 10 years earlier, the first night he taught her how to read a packet capture. 6 months later, she took a job at Helix Defense Technologies in McLean, Virginia. $200 million revenue. 3 classified Pentagon contracts. A glass tower 6 blocks from the CIA. She brought 2 master's degrees from MIT and Carnegie Mellon. She brought 6 years of joint experience with her late husband. She brought a quiet discipline that nobody in the building knew how to read. What they read instead was her skin. The CTO of Helix Defense was a 52-year-old man named Trevor Anderson. Bespoke loafers, 3 children in private school, a glass case of golf trophies behind his desk, a second mortgage on a Lake Tahoe property he could not quite afford. From the first interview, he had decided who Aaliyah Sterling was, and nothing in the next 6 years would change his mind. He passed her over for promotion 4 times. The first promotion went to a young white engineer named Tyler Davis, whom Aaliyah had personally trained for 3 months. Trevor's reason, delivered in front of Tyler himself, was that Tyler had more executive presence. The second went to a man named Brandon Caldwell, who had a habit of repeating Aaliyah's ideas 10 minutes after she said them in meetings. The third was given without an internal announcement. By the fourth, Trevor told her in a performance review that she had reached the ceiling of her capability and asked if she truly belonged in a defense company. In October of 2023, she wore a black dress to work because she had come straight from her uncle's funeral that weekend and had not had time to change. Trevor called her into his office and closed the door. He told her the company required a more professional dress code from her. Pants, blazers, no dresses. He did not give the same instruction to Sarah from networking, Jennifer from compliance, or Megan, his own assistant, all of whom wore dresses every day. For 2 years afterward, Aaliyah stood in her closet each morning and passed every dress on the rail. She ate lunch alone in the company cafeteria. The strategy sync, held every Wednesday at 9 in the morning, never included her, though her credentials exceeded 3/4 of the senior engineers in the room. When she finally emailed Trevor to ask why, his reply read, "It is an invite-only meeting. When I think you are ready, I will add you in." 4 years passed. She was never ready. At the company Christmas party at the Ritz-Carlton in Tyson's Corner the year before, Trevor raised his glass in front of the entire firm and said loud enough for the room to hear, "And Aaliyah, thank you for always reminding us about diversity. HR is so proud." She did not laugh. She went to the bathroom. She told her reflection not to cry. She did not cry. She kept a framed photograph of James on her desk, in his Navy uniform, standing beside a server room in Norfolk. When she was asked about him, she gave one sentence. When Trevor asked her about him, in a one-on-one meeting in 2023, he framed her dead husband as an emotional connection that explained her interest in defense work. She stood up and walked out. Trevor reported her to Human Resources for unprofessional behavior. She kept her head down. She did her job. She raised Maya alone. She watched, week after week, as Brandon Caldwell took credit in front of executives for systems Aaliyah had quietly designed at midnight while her daughter slept. She did not know that the night of November the 11th would change everything. At 10:30 on the night of November the 11th, Aaliyah Sterling was helping her daughter Maya finish a third-grade book report on whales. She was wearing a navy blue dress with thin straps. Her cousin Vanessa had gotten married that afternoon at a small chapel in Falls Church, and Aaliyah had attended in the dress. It was the first family event she had attended since James died. She had felt, for 90 minutes, almost like a woman again. Then her phone vibrated. The Helix internal alert system had flagged anomalous credential probing on the corporate network. Most engineers would have closed the alert and gone to bed. Most engineers would have trusted that the after-hours team would handle it. Aaliyah Sterling opened her laptop, opened the live traffic feed, and within 90 seconds her hands went cold. This was not a probe. This was a coordinated, multi-stage operation that had been preparing for months. The attackers were quiet, slow, and methodical. They had already mapped the network. They were now moving toward one specific target, the operational treasury account that held $50 million in pre-staged funds for a Pentagon supply contract scheduled to clear at 9 the next morning. She called the neighbor across the hall, Mrs. Patterson, and asked if Maya could sleep on her couch for the night. Then she kissed her daughter's forehead, whispered a promise she had whispered many times before, and drove to McLean in the dress. She reached the 9th floor at 11:15. The building was empty. The overhead lights came up in slow sections as she walked from the elevator to her desk. She put her bag down. She did not bother to change into the spare blazer she kept in her drawer. There was no time. At 12:45 in the morning, she did what protocol required. She called Trevor Anderson. He picked up on the 5th ring. His wife answered first, irritated. Then his voice came on, thick with sleep and instant anger. "Aaliyah, what time is it?" "Sir, I have an active intrusion on the production network. The threat actor is targeting the Lockheed Treasury staging account. I'm requesting authorization to initiate emergency containment." "Have you ruled out false positive?" "Yes, sir. I've correlated 3 independent telemetry sources." "Aaliyah." His voice cut her off, low and sharp. "I have told you. Do not panic. Do not run to me at midnight every time you see a flag. If this is another false alarm, this will be the last problem you have at this company. Do you understand me?" The line went dead. She set the phone down. She looked at the photograph of James on her desk. She put both hands flat on the keyboard, and she went to work. For the next 6 hours, she worked alone. She isolated the compromised segment. She moved the $50 million treasury account into a temporary wallet she controlled with her own signing key. She built a custom firewall around segment 7, where the attackers had set up their staging post. She watched every packet they sent. She mirrored every command they typed. She prepared the evidence chain the way her husband had taught her, hash by hash, timestamp by timestamp, with cryptographic seals on every entry. If this case ever went to a federal court, the chain would hold. At 3:20 in the morning, she stopped typing. She stood up. She walked to the window of the 9th floor and looked out at the McLean skyline. Her shoulders were shaking. She was so tired she could barely see straight. She heard James in her head, from a night in their kitchen 10 years before. He had been sitting at the table in a gray navy sweatshirt, and she had been frustrated with a packet capture she could not unravel. He had pushed his coffee cup toward her and said, "When the attacker is already inside, you don't chase them. You let them lead you. You watch what they want. You wait. Patience is a weapon, baby. Patience is a weapon." She whispered the words back to the empty floor. "Patience is a weapon." Then she returned to her desk. At 5:15 in the morning, the attackers made their final move. They reached for the treasury account. Aaliyah triggered her emergency containment routine. The system snapped into a controlled crash, isolating the compromised segment behind a wall of her own design. The Treasury account stayed safe. The attackers were locked in Segment 7, swinging at nothing, unaware that the room they were standing in had no walls. She did not stand up to celebrate. She did not write a triumphant email. She stayed at her desk, eyes red, watching her 3 monitors, waiting to see whether the attackers would give up and disconnect, or whether they would try to pivot to another part of the network. Containment was not enough. She had to watch them die. At 6:58 in the morning, the elevator on the 9th floor opened. Trevor Anderson stepped out. He saw the production dashboard on the wall display glowing red. He saw the early shift engineer, a junior named Diana Brooks, look up at him in confusion. And then he saw Aaliyah Sterling, sitting at her desk in a dress, not typing, not standing, simply staring at 3 screens with cold red eyes. The expression on his face shifted in 3 stages. First, surprise. Then, suspicion. Then, the slow tightening of a man who had been waiting 6 years for a reason. He walked to her desk. He did not say good morning. He did not ask what had happened. He looked her up and down once, his mouth pulling at the corner, and then his voice rose loud enough for the entire 9th floor to hear. "You crashed my system. You're fired." Aaliyah did not turn. "Get out before I call someone to catch a rat like you." The floor went silent. 40 engineers froze at their desks. Keisha Williams stood up halfway, then sat back down, her hands trembling. "My name is Aaliyah," she said, slowly turning from the screens. "An attack is underway. 90 seconds. Did I ask your name?" He slammed his hand on her desk. "You messed up the system, sat here stroking your rat whiskers, and now you talk back?" She stood up. "You'll regret firing me." He sneered. He gestured at the security guards. He told them to walk her out and never to let her back into the lobby. The younger guard, Officer Reynolds, hesitated. The older one moved first. At 7:14, Aaliyah Sterling sat in the parking lot in her Honda Civic, the cardboard box on the passenger seat. The framed photograph of James lay on top, glass cracked at the corner from where it had hit the floor. She did not start the engine. She sat with both hands on the steering wheel and looked at the building. She picked up her phone. She called Mrs. Patterson. She thanked her for keeping Maya overnight. She kept her voice even. She hung up. Then she put her forehead against the steering wheel and cried for 90 seconds. Quiet. Controlled. The kind of crying a single mother does when she knows she has to drive a car in 3 minutes. She wiped her face. She started the engine. She drove away. Upstairs, Trevor Anderson walked into the executive boardroom at 7:45, calm and smiling. The CEO, Gregory Wilson, was already there with 3 board members. Trevor waved off the matter. A junior engineer panicked overnight, tripped the emergency containment, and bricked half of Segment 7. "I've handled it. She's gone. The $40 million Lockheed signing today is on track." Gregory Wilson nodded. He did not ask the engineer's name. He had trusted his CTO for 11 years. At 8:30, Trevor called Brandon Caldwell into his office. "Brandon, clean up Aaliyah's mess. Get Segment 7 back online before the Lockheed signing." Brandon stood a little straighter. "Yes, sir. She probably over-engineered the whole thing. I'll strip it down and bring it up clean." He walked to Aaliyah's desk. He looked at the custom firewall she had built. He looked at the running scripts. He looked at the cryptographic evidence chain still capturing live packets. He did not understand any of it. He did not call anyone. He did not ask a question. He shrugged and typed a single command. "Terminate all custom processes. Restore default configuration." Aaliyah's firewall collapsed. Segment 7 came back online. The attackers, still locked in the staging post, felt the walls fall. They pivoted in 17 seconds. This time they did not reach for the Treasury account, which was no longer where they had last seen it. They reached for something larger. They reached for the master contract database, the technical specifications, the client roster, the personnel files, and the financial records for every Pentagon engagement Helix Defense had signed in the last decade. The estimated value on the underground market exceeded $200 million. Brandon Caldwell stood up and sent a message to Trevor. Handled it. She had it overcomplicated, simplified everything, all green. At 9:15, the network monitoring console on the wall began to scream. Not a warning, a 4-tone exfiltration alert. Brandon stared at the screen for 30 seconds before he understood. Then he ran. He burst into Trevor's office. He could not get a complete sentence out. He used the word leak 3 times. He used the word live twice. Trevor's face went white, then red, then white again. He picked up the phone and called the McLean Police Department. 3 patrol cars arrived in 15 minutes. The lead officer walked the 9th floor for less than 10 minutes before he made a second phone call to his sergeant. The sergeant made a third call to the special agent in charge of the Washington field office of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, because the data leaving the Helix network was already being measured in terabytes. At 10 in the morning, 3 unmarked black sport utility vehicles entered the visitor parking lot and stopped in a single line in front of the lobby. 8 agents in dark blue jackets stepped out. The lead agent, a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair pulled tight against her scalp, walked through the lobby without breaking stride. Her badge read, Special Agent in Charge Catherine Moore, FBI Cyber Division. She took the elevator to the 9th floor. She did not introduce herself to Trevor. She did not shake his hand. She walked to Aaliyah Sterling's empty desk, set down a hardened laptop, opened the forensic logs, and began to read. Trevor watched her from 20 feet away. His mouth was dry. He had prepared a short speech about the irresponsible junior engineer he had dismissed at sunrise. He cleared his throat. He took half a step forward. Catherine Moore did not look up from the screen. He stopped where he stood. He did not yet know whose night he was about to read. Catherine Moore read for 40 minutes without speaking. She did not take notes. She did not ask for water. She read the way a surgeon reads an X-ray, with the rest of the room suspended around her. What she saw on the screen was not an incident report. It was a piece of forensic craftsmanship. She saw a single human being identify a multi-month, multi-stage intrusion at 11:15 the night before, drive into an empty building, isolate the compromised segment by midnight, redirect a $50 million treasury account into a controlled wallet, build a custom firewall around the attacker's staging post, and hold them inside that staging post for 6 hours, while preparing a cryptographic chain of evidence indistinguishable from one her own analysts would have built in a federal lab. Every action logged, every packet hashed, every timestamp sealed. She turned to the agent beside her, a younger man named Reeves. Reeves, who built this? He scrolled to the authorship metadata. He read the name out loud. Aaliyah Sterling, Senior Cybersecurity Engineer. Catherine Moore did not move. She read for 2 more minutes. Then she said, very softly, she prepared a federal chain of custody, by hand, in the middle of an active attack, while in a dress. Reeves looked at her. Find her, Moore said. Now. Trevor Anderson had been standing 20 feet away the entire time. He had been preparing the version of the story he was going to tell. He had been waiting for an opening. Catherine Moore turned to him as if she had felt him breathing. Mr. Anderson. Yes, ma'am, Walk with me. She did not wait. She walked toward the small, glass-walled conference room beside the engineering floor, the one Trevor used for his private one-on-ones. He followed her in. She did not invite him to sit. She did not sit either. The woman who built that firewall and prepared that evidence chain. What is her name and her employment status at this company right now? Trevor's tongue felt heavy. Aaliyah Sterling. We terminated her this morning. Insubordination. She crashed the production environment in the middle of the night without authorization, and when I asked her to, Mr. Anderson. He stopped. Catherine Moore took a slow breath. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. In the last 12 hours, a coordinated threat actor attempted to exfiltrate $50 million from your treasury account. The only reason that money is still in your control is that Aaliyah Sterling drove to this building in the middle of the night, in evening wear, and built a containment perimeter that I would have signed my own name to. She then sat at her desk and watched the intruders for 6 hours so they could not pivot. At 6:58 this morning, you walked off an elevator, looked at a red dashboard, looked at a black woman in a dress, and made a decision. Is that correct? Trevor did not answer. Then, at 8:30, you instructed another engineer, a man with significantly less expertise, to dismantle her containment. He did. The attackers pivoted in 17 seconds. They did not retake the treasury because Aaliyah had already moved it. So they reached for your master contract database instead. $200 million in classified Pentagon intellectual property, which is now leaving this building in real time. Is that correct? His voice barely came out. Yes, ma'am. She stepped half a foot closer. Mr. Anderson, let me be very clear about what I am telling you. The single human being inside this $200 million company who is qualified to slow this bleed and walk my agents through the forensic state of your network is the one you marched out of your lobby at 7 o'clock this morning. The one you called a rat. The one whose name you didn't bother to learn after she had worked here for 6 years. Do you understand me? Agent Moore, do you understand me? Yes, get her on the phone. I'm not sure she'll... Mr. Anderson. Catherine Moore's eyes did not blink. I am not asking. Pick up the phone. Call Aaliyah Sterling. Ask her, politely, to return to this building. If you cannot ask politely, you will hand the phone to me, and I will. Choose. Trevor took out his phone with a hand that was no longer steady. He scrolled to her contact. He had not called her directly in 3 years. He pressed the call button. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. She picked up on the 4th ring. Aaliyah Sterling speaking. Her voice was calm, almost flat. The voice of a woman who had cried in her car at 7:14 and finished crying by 7:16. Aaliyah, it's Trevor Anderson. A pause. I know who it is, Mr. Anderson. He swallowed. He looked at Catherine Moore. He looked back at the floor. There has been a development. The FBI is here. They have asked me to ask you to come back to the building. They have some questions about your work last night. Another pause, this one longer. Catherine Moore watched his face the way a hawk watches a field. When Aaliyah finally spoke, her voice was the same flat calm. You fired me 3 hours ago, Mr. Anderson, in front of 40 people. You called me a rat. You spit on the dress I am wearing for the first family event I've been to since my husband died. You walked me out of the lobby with 2 security guards. And now you would like me to come back and help you. Trevor opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I am not coming back for you, Mr. Anderson. Tell the FBI agent in the room with you to call me herself. The line went dead. Trevor lowered the phone. He looked at Catherine Moore. He did not say anything. She held out her hand. He gave her the phone. She tapped Aaliyah's number. She walked 3 steps to the corner of the glass room. She turned her back to Trevor. She lifted the phone to her ear. On the 9th floor outside, every engineer at every desk had figured out that something was happening. Keisha Williams was standing now. Diana Brooks was standing too. Even Officer Reynolds, the young guard who had walked Aaliyah out at 7, had stepped halfway out of the lobby and was watching the elevators. Trevor Anderson stood alone in the glass room with a federal agent who had her back to him. And for the first time in his career, he understood that he was not the most powerful person in any room he was going to enter for the rest of the day. At 11:08 in the morning, Aaliyah Sterling was standing in her own kitchen in Alexandria, Virginia. She had changed out of the dress when she got home. She was wearing jeans and an old gray navy sweatshirt that had belonged to James. Maya was in the living room, drawing a humpback whale, humming to herself. Aaliyah had just finished making a peanut butter sandwich for her daughter. She was holding the knife. The phone on the counter rang, a number she did not recognize. She let it ring 3 times. This is Aaliyah Sterling. Ms. Sterling, my name is Catherine Moore. I am the special agent in charge of the FBI Cyber Division. I am not calling to ask you for anything. I am calling to thank you. Aaliyah set the knife down. She did not say anything. Catherine Moore did not fill the silence. In 25 years of federal cybersecurity work, I have never seen a private sector incident response on the level of what you executed last night. You identified a multi-stage intrusion in under 2 minutes. You protected $50 million in operational funds. You held a foreign threat actor inside a containment perimeter for 6 hours. And you prepared a forensic evidence chain to federal standard, in real time, alone in an empty building. Aaliyah's hand was flat on the counter. You saved a $200 million company last night, Miss Sterling. You saved 340 jobs in that building. You saved an active Pentagon supply contract. Moore paused. Her voice softened. And you were fired for it. The word hit Aaliyah in the throat. She had been ready all morning to answer anything. She had been ready when she cried in the car. She had been ready to be calm and polite and to never, ever let anyone see what it had cost her. She was not ready for someone to say out loud what had happened. Agent Moore, Her voice broke. She put the phone down on the counter. She covered her face with one hand. Her shoulders shook. She did not make a sound. She cried the way single mothers learn to cry, silent, folded in on itself. The kind of crying you do with the kitchen tap running so the child in the next room cannot hear. From the living room, Maya's small voice came through. Mom? Are you okay? Aaliyah inhaled. She wiped her face on James's sweatshirt. She picked the phone back up. I'm okay, baby. I'm just on an important call. She put the phone to her ear. Agent Moore, I apologize. I'm here, Miss Sterling. There is nothing to apologize for. I want you to listen to me. You do not owe Helix Defense anything. You do not owe Trevor Anderson the time of day. But I am sitting with a CEO who has just understood, in the last 40 minutes, the size of the mistake that was made on his 9th floor this morning. And 2 Pentagon liaisons will not sign a contract until they hear from you. The only person who can walk us through what happened to that network in the last 14 hours is you. Aaliyah looked through the doorway. Maya was kneeling on the rug. The morning sun came through the window onto her daughter's hair. You do not have to come, Moore said. Say no, and I will hang up, and every credit you are owed will reach you in writing. I am not asking you to forgive anyone. I am asking you to walk into that boardroom one time, in whatever clothes you choose, and let the men in there see who they fired this morning. The choice is yours. Aaliyah was quiet for a long time. She thought about the dress folded on the chair in her bedroom. She thought about James's sweatshirt on her shoulders. She thought about Keisha Williams, 28 years old, sitting at the desk next to hers, who had watched everything. She thought about Maya kneeling on the rug. Agent Moore. Yes. Give me 20 minutes. She hung up. She walked into her bedroom. She took off the sweatshirt. She picked up the navy blue dress from the chair, the one she had cried in, the one she had been called a rat in. She put it on. She did not put on makeup. She did not brush her hair smooth. She let her natural curls fall. She kissed her daughter on top of her head and told Mrs. Patterson she would be back by 2. She picked up the framed photograph of James from the hall table and slid it into her purse. She drove to McLean. At 11:30 in the morning, Aaliyah Sterling walked back into the lobby of Helix Defense Technologies in the navy blue dress. The receptionist who had watched her be walked out at 7 stood, slowly, without saying anything. She stepped into the elevator. She pressed 9. When the doors opened, every engineer at every desk was already standing. They had been waiting since 7. Keisha Williams stood with both hands pressed against her own chest. Tyler Davis, the engineer Trevor had promoted over her 4 years before, could not meet her eyes. Officer Reynolds, at the elevator bank, gave the smallest possible nod, the kind a soldier gives another soldier. Brandon Caldwell was in a small office down the hall with a lawyer. The door was closed. Aaliyah walked the length of the engineering bullpen, the framed photograph of James in her hand. She did not look left. She did not look right. She pushed open the glass door of the executive boardroom. Inside, the room turned. Catherine Moore was at the head of the long table beside 3 other agents. CEO Gregory Wilson was on his feet before the door had fully opened. The two Pentagon liaisons sat to the right. CFO Gordon Hayes was at the far end. 5 board members lined the wall. Trevor Anderson was in a chair against the window, head down, hands flat on his knees. Gregory Wilson stepped forward, his voice already shaking. "Ms. Sterling, I owe you an apology I do not have the words for." Aaliyah raised one hand. "Mr. Wilson, thank you. Please sit down. I am not going to speak to you first." He sat. Aaliyah turned to Trevor. "Mr. Anderson, look at me." He did not move. "Look at me." The silence stretched. Trevor lifted his head. His eyes touched hers and slid away. "No. Look at me. I want you to see the person you have not seen in 6 years." His eyes came back. They did not move again. "Good. Because I am going to tell you exactly what you did. And I am going to use dates." She set the framed photograph of James face down on the table and rested her hand on the back of it. March of 2022. The architecture meeting for the Lockheed proposal. I presented a zero-trust framework. You looked out the window the entire time. When I finished, you said, "Thank you, Aaliyah. Brandon, what do you think?" 10 minutes later, Brandon repeated my proposal using the same examples, the same numbers. You stood up and said, "Brandon, that is exactly the kind of strategic thinking I am looking for." I sat in that chair and counted ceiling tiles, 23 of them before the meeting ended. That was every Tuesday and every Thursday for 4 years. A board member quietly looked away. In 2020, I applied for senior engineer. You gave it to Tyler Davis. I had personally trained Tyler to read a packet capture. You said, "Tyler has executive presence. You will learn that with time." Tyler came to my desk later and said, "I am sorry, Aaliyah. I did not ask for this." A 26-year-old apologizing for something you had done. Tyler Davis, on the other side of the glass wall, looked up for the first time. In 2021, team lead, Brandon. In 2022, principal engineer. You did not announce the position. 8 months ago, you told me I had reached the ceiling of my capability. You asked if I truly belonged at a defense company. She turned the photograph of James right side up. I have 2 master's degrees from MIT and Carnegie Mellon. I have prevented 17 security incidents that you never knew about. My ceiling was not my capability. My ceiling was the glass over your head. Gordon Hayes pressed his fingers into his temples. October of 2023. I came to work in a black dress the Monday after my uncle's funeral. You called me into your office. You told me the company required a more professional dress code. No dresses. I asked you why Sarah from networking, Jennifer from compliance, and your own assistant, Megan, all of whom wore dresses every day, were permitted to. You did not answer. You said, "I just want the clients to see seriousness when they walk onto this floor." The problem was not the dress. The problem was who was wearing it. She looked down at the dress she was wearing now. For 2 years afterward, I stood in my closet every morning and passed every dress on the rail. Last night was the first time I wore one to this office. I did not have time to change. I was busy saving your company. Catherine Moore's jaw set, the smallest possible movement. December of last year, the Christmas party at the Ritz-Carlton. You raised a glass in front of the entire firm and said, "And Aaliyah, thank you for always reminding us about diversity. HR is so proud." I went to the women's restroom. I looked in the mirror. I told myself, "Aaliyah, do not cry here. Do not give them that." When I came back, you walked up and said, "See? I knew you had a sense of humor." A board member had begun to cry silently. Every Wednesday at 9, you held a strategy sync. My credentials exceeded 3/4 of the men in that room. In 4 years, I was never invited. When I emailed you to ask why, you wrote back, "It is invite only. When I think you are ready, I will add you." I sat at my desk every Wednesday at 9 and listened to my colleagues walk past my chair to that meeting. They did not look at me. They knew. She did not pause. Last night, when I found the intrusion at 11:15, do you know what I thought? If I had ever been in strategy sync, I would have known about these vulnerabilities a month ago. There would have been no attack. Your $50 million was almost gone because you locked me out of a meeting I had earned 4 years ago. Her voice dropped into the lower register. April of 2024. Maya had a fever of 104 degrees. I came to your office to leave early. You said, and I have the recording, "Aaliyah, I understand single mom is complicated, but this is why I hesitate to give you the larger projects. You have too many distractions." My 8-year-old daughter is a distraction, Mr. Anderson. Brandon Caldwell has 2 children. He left early for them 6 times that year. You never said a word to him. She lifted the photograph of James from the table and turned his face toward Trevor. And finally, the one I have not told anyone for 6 years. In 2023, in our one-on-one, you said to me, "I heard your husband was a serviceman, killed overseas, right? Is that why you wanted to work in defense? Some kind of emotional connection?" The room stopped breathing. Mr. Anderson, my husband is not an emotional connection. He is the father of my daughter. He is the man who taught me everything I know about incident response at our kitchen table 10 years ago. Last night at 3:20 in the morning, when I was so tired I could not see the screen, I stood at the window of your 9th floor and I heard him. "Patience is a weapon, baby. Patience is a weapon." That is how I saved your company last night. With what my husband, the man you called an emotional connection, gave me. She set the photograph back down, face up. She turned slowly to face the glass wall. Keisha Williams was on the other side, both hands flat against the glass, tears running down her face. "Keisha, if you can hear me, you do not have to apologize for asking the question. You do not have to wait 6 years. You do not have to wait at all." Aaliyah turned back to Trevor. "I do not need your apology, Mr. Anderson. What I want is this. For the rest of your life, every time you meet a black woman in a professional setting, I want you to remember last night. The one person in this building good enough to save your company was the one you spent 6 years humiliating. Every dress code you enforced, every voice you elevated, none of it mattered at 2 in the morning, when the only person with the skill to save your company was the one you were too small to see. That is the weight you will carry. It is yours." She sat down. She picked up a pen. She wrote one line on the legal pad and pushed it across the table to Catherine Moore. "Forensic logs. Segment 7. 23:47 last night." The Pentagon colonel stood up first. He did not applaud. He simply stood. Then Gordon Hayes. Then Gregory Wilson. Then Catherine Moore, who in 25 years of federal service had never stood for a private citizen at the end of an investigation. Then every board member, one at a time. Then, through the glass wall, every engineer on the 9th floor. Trevor Anderson sat in his chair against the window, his hands flat on his knees, his head down. He did not stand. He could not. Hold on. I have to stop right here. I'm sitting with this story, and I am furious. 6 whole years, she bit her tongue. 6 full years. And the morning she saves his whole company, he spits on her, calls her a rat, in her own dress? Where is justice? At 11:58 in the morning, the senior Pentagon liaison stepped out of the boardroom and made a phone call to the Department of Defense Acquisitions Office. He spoke for 90 seconds. When he returned to the room, he addressed Catherine Moore first, and then he addressed Gregory Wilson. The $40 million Lockheed contract will be signed at noon, as scheduled. Given the documented quality of the incident response, the Department of Defense will also be opening a competitive review for next year's $200 million expansion package. There is one condition. The leadership of your Chief Technology Office will be reviewed and replaced by close of business today. Gregory Wilson nodded once. He did not look at Trevor. At 12 o'clock exactly, Gregory Wilson walked out of the boardroom and onto the 9th floor. He did not bring notes. He did not bring a microphone. He stood in front of the engineering bullpen with his hands clasped in front of him and his voice barely steady. "This morning, I allowed my CTO to fire the most capable engineer in this building. I did not intervene. That is my failure. It is not Mr. Anderson's alone. Mr. Anderson is being removed from his position effective immediately. Aaliyah Sterling has saved this company. I do not know if she will ever return to it. But I will spend the remainder of my tenure trying to deserve the trust she will not give me back. Nobody clapped. Nobody needed to. Keisha Williams sat down at her desk and put her head in her hands. Inside the boardroom, Catherine Moore walked Aaliyah through the next steps for the federal investigation. Aaliyah answered every technical question with the same flat clarity she had used on the phone that morning. She did not look at Trevor again. She did not need to. When the questions were done, Aaliyah stood up. She picked up the framed photograph of James. She slid it back into her purse. Gregory Wilson stepped forward. Ms. Sterling, whatever role you want at Helix, whatever salary you name. Aaliyah looked at him. Mr. Wilson, I have a daughter to pick up from school. She walked out of the boardroom. She walked the length of the 9th floor in the navy blue dress. She rode the elevator down. She drove home. By close of business that same Tuesday, Trevor Anderson had cleaned out his corner office at Helix Defense Technologies. He left through the lobby alone, without a security escort, carrying a single small box. Nobody walked him out. Nobody said goodbye. The receptionist who had stood for Aaliyah at 11:30 did not stand for him. 3 weeks later, the Washington Post ran a 4,000-word feature on the breach and the woman who had stopped it. The headline read, "The engineer they fired at sunrise." Aaliyah Sterling declined to be interviewed. The Post ran the article without a recent photograph of her. Trevor Anderson's wife read the article over coffee in their kitchen in Great Falls. She left him before lunch. The Lake Tahoe property went into foreclosure within 60 days. Trevor never held a chief technology officer position at a defense contractor again. He took a direct-to-level role at a small business-to-business software company in Reston, 2 grades below the position he had lost, and he was reported to have stopped attending industry conferences entirely. Brandon Caldwell was terminated for gross negligence the same afternoon. Helix filed a civil suit to recover a portion of the damages caused by his unauthorized disassembly of the Segment 7 firewall. His name appeared on a private industry blacklist, circulated quietly among defense and aerospace human resources departments within the month. 6 months later, he was working a help desk shift at a regional sporting goods chain in Idaho Falls. He was 34 years old. Keisha Williams was personally promoted by Gregory Wilson to senior engineer the following Monday morning, with a written apology that referenced, by name, the demotion she had received from Trevor Anderson the previous year. 4 months after that, she was named Acting Chief Technology Officer of Helix Defense. She was the youngest CTO in the company's history, and the first black woman to hold the position in the entire Northern Virginia defense corridor. Officer Reynolds, the young security guard, received a handwritten letter from Aaliyah Sterling at his home address 2 weeks after the firing. The letter thanked him for the small nod he had given her at the elevator bank. Folded inside was a written recommendation on Aaliyah's personal letterhead, addressed to the admissions board of the Federal Bureau of Investigation Academy at Quantico. He was accepted to the next cohort. Aaliyah Sterling did not return to Helix. She accepted a senior consulting contract with the FBI Cyber Division, and within 90 days had quietly opened her own cybersecurity consulting practice focused on insider threat assessment for defense contractors. She refused every interview request. She picked Maya up from school every day at 3:15. 6 months after the night of November the 11th, the FBI announced the arrest of 4 members of an organized cybercrime syndicate in Bucharest. The press release did not name the operation. It did not name the engineer, whose forensic evidence chain had made the prosecution possible. A single handwritten note arrived at Aaliyah's home 3 days later. It was a half sheet of cream-colored stationery, folded once, slipped into a plain federal envelope. There was no return address. 2 lines, in blue ink. Patience is a weapon. Thank you. She read the note twice. She walked into the living room. She placed it on the mantel, beside the framed photograph of her husband. Maya, doing homework on the rug, looked up. "Mom, who is the letter from?" Aaliyah looked at the photograph. She looked at her daughter. A friend. Someone who finally saw me. She turned off the kitchen light and sat down on the rug next to her daughter to help her finish a fourth-grade book report on whales. The most dangerous person in any room is the one you have already decided is not worth listening to. Aaliyah Sterling sat at a desk on the 9th floor of a $200 million company for 6 years. She ate lunch alone. She wore pants because she was told to. She watched another engineer take credit for her ideas every Tuesday and every Thursday. She raised a daughter alone, on a salary 3 pay grades below the men she had personally trained. And when the night came that nobody else in the building could save the company, she was the only one who could. And she was the one they fired for it. Trevor Anderson did not discriminate against Aaliyah Sterling because he was unusually cruel. He did it because nothing in his world had ever required him to look at her. The dress code, the strategy sync invitations, the joke at the Christmas party, the 4 denied promotions. None of it felt like racism to him. It felt like ordinary judgment. And that is the most dangerous kind of bias. It does not arrive in a hood. It arrives in a corner office with a glass case of golf trophies. Brilliance does not announce itself. Dignity does not demand applause. The person eating lunch alone in your cafeteria, the woman whose ideas are repeated 10 minutes later by someone else, the engineer you have decided has reached the ceiling of her capability. She may be the only person in your building who will save you at 2 in the morning when everything you have built is on fire. Listen better. Promote braver. Apologize sooner. And if you ever spit on a black woman in a dress while she is saving your company, understand that the universe keeps an evidence chain too. I told this story because women like Aaliyah stay invisible until the moment we need them. Too much black brilliance is dismissed for skin color alone. Talent survives prejudice, but only when we choose to see it. Be the one who sees. Like, share, and subscribe. Comment below the name of the person at your work who deserves the credit they have not yet received.